Welcome everyone to the Ask an Architect show. Here with me today, Mike Ayles. Really interested to hear what Mike has to say about some of the unique aspects that he works on in his firm. So we're going to dive into some topics we haven't spent a lot of time on before. Mike, before we get started, want to kind of get the 15-second rundown, who you are and kind of what you're doing right now.
You want that in 15 seconds?
About plus or minus,
All right.
plus or minus 2 hours.
Okay, I could do that. I work for a architecture and interior design firm in Bridgeport, Connecticut, about 34 people. I'm a principal there. I've been at the firm for 23 years, and
Okay.
over a period of time, went from project architecture, manager, operations, became a principal, and my route into being a principal was business development. That was
Okay.
something that the other partners had felt that I had a strength in over a period of time with clients, and so they kind of let me loose and said, "That's your in to be a principal." So business
Excellent.
development was my ticket to that.
I really want to get into that business development angle and kind of get your perspective on what that means in an architecture firm. But real quick, you've spent a long time at one firm, which you just kind of mentioned, going from project architect to manager to principal.
Right.
Take me through kind of the three different stages from the beginning to the middle to where you are now. What made you successful in those first few years? What helped you rise through the ranks in your first 5 years at the firm?
Well, I was part of the Bridging the Gap panel yesterday, and something
Okay.
that we all said, and I've said over and over again, even in the session today, was just taking the initiative and having the incentive to do things. I know this. I'm probably aging myself a little bit on this one, but when
You
it
just
comes
experienced,
to CAD, when CAD was really now 100% of everything of all the work. I just took it upon myself to create standards and to be the person that organized all of that. And then I took over more of an IT role, and then I took over more of a file organization role that was more technological driven. So I set myself apart from that, and I think I've always said, differentiate yourself. Just find the one thing, find the two things, whatever it is that differentiates yourself. For me, it was technology. I was in a firm of 14, 15 people that was growing, and no one could keep up with that technology. They didn't know what to do. So they're like, well, he's the young guy. Let him do it. When I was young, younger.
So part of that initiative is finding the void or finding the problem and then creating the solution. And
Right.
if you are part of the solution or the solution itself, that really puts you in a valuable position.
Right, and try not to create the problem and then solve the problem. I heard that earlier.
Yeah.
Usually they figure out if you're creating the problem and then you have to solve it. So if there's a problem existing, you just jump right in.
Make sure it's
and
not
solve it.
artificial.
Yeah, make sure you're not making it up. Yeah.
Now, what about kind of the middle part of your career when you started to be a project architect, you got your license, and then maybe even started to take on more project management roles? What helped you succeed in that section of your career where you were really starting to take on more responsibility, maybe even had some supervisory role? What helped you continue to propel yourself?
I think I really still love dealing with clients. And when you understand how a client thinks behind the scenes, whether it's a board of 12 people or a public committee or a couple who's doing a house, which I haven't done recently, thank God. I did not. I steered away from that. When you see how a client thinks, it makes all the difference in the world. So for me, being involved in the community was how I elevated myself to understanding what a client was going through. And not just on the design side, not just on the management side, not just on the practical architecture side, but on the what is it really that keeps them up at night.
Sure.
And I hear that all the time. When any good business development and marketing is about, right, what keeps you up at night? What can I do to solve your problem? What differentiates you? And I would have to say, I have to admit AIA. I was involved very much at AIA for a number of years. From the time I came out of school, I wasn't really involved in AIAS, but I made up for it in AIA.
Good enough.
And now I'm trying to get back to AIAS, right? It took me too long to do that. But being involved with the AIA, Young Architects Forum, the National Associates Committee, you learn leadership skills just intrinsically by being a part of an organization like that.
Sure.
And so between AIA and community, putting that together and then progressing as a project manager into client development and working with clients, it all kind of was a perfect mesh.
So you mentioned at the beginning that now you're doing business development, and that's kind of your role as in the principal spot.
Right.
So, and you said you kind of have tried to interpret what a client thinks or anticipate that. So what does a client think?
They think a lot of different things.
Yeah, give me some scenarios, some examples, some specifics as far as you can, without going into too much detail. But what are some scenarios, challenging or positive, that you've really kind of come across that can kind of give our viewers an inside look into how to negotiate with a client, how to create a good bond and a good relationship, and maybe something that went sour that you really struggled with?
Well, I think the number one thing is trust. You have to have trust, and be, maybe not a role model. Role models maybe a little bit more personal, but having the trust and the empathy to be able to talk to them. And a lot of times, I met clients or individuals with a company or whatever, and you really have to kind of take them out to lunch. You really have to kind of have time off the job site, off of the design meetings, and say, hey, I want to get to know you. As soon as that happens, there were a couple of clients and ourselves, you go to a ball game, you go have lunch, you go to an industry event and you invite them, and the next thing you know, they're like, hey, you know what? I like hanging out with you. I can trust you. Trust, I think, is the number one thing. And then when it comes to what are clients thinking, I mean, I hate to say, if the clients are thinking fees, they're probably not a great client to have.
Sure. Or probably one of the more challenging situations.
And I think students over time and as they get into the industry, they're going to know fees are important. But if you can show very clearly what the value is, and you are very transparent, and you tell them what it is they're getting, and you explain that, and it's not just a number, this is what I'm getting for a number if it's fee-based, for example.
Sure.
But I said something today that every architecture firm wants two types of clients. Those that are loyal and won't go anywhere else, and those that will recommend you. They may not have all the opportunities in the world, but they're certainly going to give you a great recommendation. If you can get those two clients, you're going to be in very, very good shape. And that goes to when you hear from a firm that they have 85, 90% retention on their clients. They're doing something right.
Sure.
They have loyal clients. They have people they can trust. They understand their business. I mean, and doing research, by the way, on
so preparation in advance of a client pitch.
On when you're pitching them and you're going in an interview, you really need to talk to them about them, not about you. If you get to the interview, you're pretty much saying, or they're saying to you, we know you're qualified. We get it. We know what you can do. Now, what can you do to the next step? What do you know about us that we should hire you? That research can be very difficult, especially if it's a private client, because sometimes they don't have everything out on the internet. But you can certainly do your research, and you can try to figure out exactly what it is that keeps that client up at night. And sometimes you're wrong, and sometimes you're right.
Yep.
So
there's no black and white. There's no roadmap
white
for it. There's no instruction manual.
Nope.
And I really like how you're highlighting some of the human factors, or you're actually emphasizing the human factors involved here.
It's very human.
Because at the end of the day, when you're working on these projects, you're spending a lot of time together, and you're going to get into some really nitty-gritty challenges. And getting along well, or being easy to work with, or being able to work through problems is probably tremendously valuable to both the client and you as the architect.
Yeah, I think this might be overstated and heard numerous times. But clients do not work with firms, right?
They work with people.
People. When a person leaves a firm and goes somewhere else, I will tell you 9 times out of 10, the client isn't going to stay with the firm. They're going to stay with the person that they worked with. It's all about relationship and trust. I mean, if I was to leave, if I was to end this right now with you, it's trust and relationship. If you can build those two, you'll go very far. And that really goes for any professionally based industry. So professional services are totally based on people. But you go and you buy a product, you're not buying the people behind the product usually, although sometimes they market it that way, right? You're buying the product. But certainly it adds strength when you put the people into it. You see the commercials about the product and the people behind it. You start having that empathy. You're like, there's people behind that. It's not just a widget. It's not just this. There's more to it. there's a service behind it. There's somebody putting that together, and making it human is huge.
So you mentioned marketing. So in a case where you maybe don't have a relationship yet, and maybe it's before the point in the interview where they know you're qualified, how do you get that interview to begin with? How do you reach out and get yourself on someone's radar, get on a new client's radar?
There's a lot of different ways. The first way is, the first thing you have to do is really kind of figure out how to correspond with them. I've heard before that there are those that like to be called, some that like an email, some that don't mind being text.
So there's not one pure way to do it.
So communication tool is one way, figuring out what's the best way to them.
Gotcha.
And then what I cannot stress enough about the inefficiency of cold calls. You might get lucky, okay?
Sure.
And I have gotten lucky once, and I've been doing this for a long time, of a cold call, because someone forced me to do it. And they said, just call them.
Yeah.
And it happened. Usually it's a warm intro. Somehow, there's a little tool out there called LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to talk about Facebook, only because Facebook's more my personal.
Sure.
But LinkedIn is the professional. Just about everyone's on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Right? Find somebody who somehow knows them. Believe it or not, you'd be surprised at the degrees of separation between someone that you want to talk to and getting that warm introduction from somebody who knows them already. To me, that's the best way of doing it. Once in a while, I will, introduce myself in a kind of maybe an email fashion, because I know they do email.
Yep.
I hardly ever text, only because I'm
Sure.
sure that will change over the next 10 years when my clients are probably going to be much younger than me, and they're going to be, they're not going to have a laptop.
Right.
They're not going to have.
Yep.
They're
We're
gonna
almost
have,
there.
They're mobile devices, right?
Yep.
Well, actually, there probably.
Yep.
It's everyone else that's not there. And
Catching up.
Yeah, the catching up. So, it takes a lot of work and research to be able to do that. But you just got to figure out who that person is that's the right person to give you that warm intro.
I love that term, warm intro. I don't think I've heard that very often, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on LinkedIn. Give me some more tactics on that, because our audience in particular, most of our students kind of don't really get into LinkedIn until they get towards the end of their
Right.
curriculum. They're starting to look for jobs, and then they realize, okay, this is essentially an online resume.
Right.
So what are some tactics that people use, whether it's personally to get their own jobs or going out and trying to get clients? Is there anything you guys do, either you or at your firm, to really try to utilize that platform in the most advantageous way possible?
I don't think I or anyone else in my office uses it nearly to the potential that it could be used.
Mm-hmm.
I think I do see a lot of students that are on LinkedIn that after an interview that I've heard before that after an interview with our firm or another firm, they go through the process, they're like, I need a LinkedIn profile. And they do it really quick, and then all of a sudden you're friends with them, and you're like, I just interviewed you. And I really don't know you, and I have a very personal, strict policy that I don't link in with you unless I know who you are and I can give you the warm introduction.
Sure, interesting. Okay.
And so if you could be friends or linked in with 800 people,
Right.
but if you really can only warm intro 200,
Then it's not an effective.
it's not really
connection.
effective, because I've gotten that before where, can you introduce me to that? Well, I don't know them. So
Because essentially you're vouching for somebody.
you're
when
vouching for someone. You're
creating
vouching
that
for their
warm
credibility, for
Yep.
their trust that they're going to do a good job. So I don't know if maybe your question is what if they're not on LinkedIn
Mhm.
yet?
Okay.
And I think that there's still a lot of social media out there. So
Yeah.
LinkedIn might be the one that's the most prominent business.
Sure.
But nowadays, Snapchat doesn't last that long. But my kids
Yeah.
are all on it, so I'm on it.
Yeah.
But Twitter and Instagram
Yeah.
and the ones that I'm familiar with, even Facebook is much more business oriented than it was years ago. And so I think that, again, you have connections. You'd be surprised at how many those connections that you have that you are close to have some sort of a relation. You need to contact someone who's at another location. Like if you're in New York and this is in something's in Boston, you'd be surprised at how many people that you went to school with maybe ended up in Boston, and then they actually have some sort of connection.
Sure.
Or they have a geographical location. And the other network, I almost forgot about this, is don't forget to use your school. For this particular audience.
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell you right now, proud Roger Williams University alumni.
Yes, sir.
And if and anyone who tries to connect with me at Roger Williams,
Yep.
I may not know them. For some reason,
But
there's
you'll-
this kindred little spirit thing.
You'll go the extra
I will
mile.
go the extra mile for them. And I have 5 people in my office that are Roger Williams grads out of 35 or 34. So, I give them a little bit more. So use your
Yep.
circles of where you went to school, because they may move out to Seattle, Washington. And then there's a job opening. Next thing you know, you're connected with them, and it just kind of takes off.
So the strategy essentially is platform agnostic, meaning that
Yeah.
platforms are going to come and go, but you're looking for the connections and ways that you can continue to expand your network.
That's right.
And your real network, not just on paper.
Right.
People
Right.
that you know that can provide that warm intro.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike, as we kind of wrap up here, we talked a lot about some different angles in terms of marketing, whether it's marketing your firm or yourself or
Mm-hmm.
positioning yourself. As our students are kind of gearing up for maybe some of them the final year of school and they're on the cusp of graduation in a year, what would you recommend to somebody about to graduate? What's the best piece of advice you can give somebody about to enter the profession that will help them in the next few years?
All right. Well, the easy one, and the one that is the one I hate to say, is make sure you know Revit.
Sure.
Or some sort of a program. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I can't tell you how many candidates and
Yeah.
resumes come through that they know Rhino, they know SketchUp,
Yep.
and they know Photoshop, and they know all of those.
I
and
love
they're-
it.
and
Yeah,
they're not-
please
and they're-
expand.
And they're not incredibly, I wouldn't say proficient, but they don't have a lot of knowledge on Revit.
Okay.
That is the way. You have to be able to use the tools. And being able to use the tools proficiently immediately makes you a leader in the firm, because there's firms out there that still are not utilizing it the way they should,
Okay.
or starting to try to implement it. So you need to be that person that
Yep.
can take that on. That's more
Great
the tools
advice.
end of
Yeah,
it.
so that's very tactical. What about
Right.
strategic?
Now, as far as strategic, I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about knowing your connections and having that warm intro about firms. I look at a lot of resumes and I look at the connection. What's my connection? What's the differentiator? I mean, all the way through to when you retire, you're always looking at trying to get more work by differentiating yourself.
Yep.
That's going to be, so how do you get your first job? You differentiate yourself. Find the one thing that's special and expand upon that. And I said this to somebody at the lunch table when we were eating. It's not necessarily about your grade point average. It's not how well you did in school. It's not the courses. All schools, for some way, shape, or form, you got an accredited degree, right? You're talented, and all the schools kind of graduate.
Sure. Yep.
What's the differentiator? Community, AIAS, what you did outside work, what your involvement is. I want to see that you're more well-rounded than you just went to architecture school.
Yep.
And I think that's what schools look for when you come out of high school. So it's the same premise that you go from high school to college. They want to see your extracurricular.
Yep.
We want to see that you're beyond just going to school and doing the courses, that you're actually contributing to society, that you're actually doing more with your time.
So you've got to find something that's proprietary to you. What is your proprietary competitive advantage? And when you're out there competing against, like you said, everyone else graduated with an architecture degree too. So how do you differentiate yourself?
I think it's find something that you're passionate about and expand upon it and talk about it. I mean, resumes can be very short, but maybe when you write that cover letter, write about how you relate to the firm that you're applying for. Make it personal. Okay, to whom it may concern,
That's great advice.
which is the standard
Don't
letter.
just check the boxes.
If they know your name, and actually, I don't know how many other people do this, but when I see my name and it's addressed to me and it's personal to me, I will respond.
Yep.
When I get a standard to whom may concern because I think it got sent to 100 other firms,
Yep.
I won't necessarily trash it, but there's a really good chance I'll trash it.
Yeah.
Because I want to have that relationship. I want to know that you did your research, that you gave it a little bit of thought, and you looked up my name.
Yep.
Or somebody's name in the firm and said, if it's maybe somebody else, that's okay, but at least it gets forwarded to me and at least you did your research. And then make a connection. I really feel I could fit into your firm because you did this project and I'm really interested in this type of work and I did this for my thesis. Oh, now we're talking. Now I've made a connection with you.
Yeah, Mike, what I love about all this advice is that it applies to a bunch of different industries. Whether you're going into traditional architecture, something on the alternative cusp, or even something completely outside of it, all of these strategies about clients, client relationships, taking ownership, taking initiative, personalization, that applies across the board. So whatever you might be into and whatever your goals are, these strategies and tactics apply.
Yeah, it's not necessarily unique.
It's not.
But after a while, I can vouch for them.
Well, Mike, thanks so much. I
You're very
appreciate
welcome.
coming on the
Anytime,
show.
Nick.
And we'll see you next time on the Ask an Architect show.